Hello, cheers, and welcome to the Crimson Stitchery episode 50. The Crimson Stitchery is a YouTube channel and state of being all about making all things beautiful and useful. My name is Anushka. You can find me elsewhere online as The Crimson Stitchery. That's the name of our Ravelry group. I'm also on Instagram, but I'm not really updating it at the moment. And this episode is coming to you courtesy of all of my lovely and wonderful supporters over on Patreon, who are keeping my channel alive thanks to monthly membership subscriptions. So cheers to you and thank you very much. And I'm sure that everyone else deeply appreciates you just as much as I do, because this is episode 50. What a milestone. It's a very big deal indeed. Now, I am sitting here on a Monday evening with a sherry glass, a crystal sherry glass full of quite posh red wine, and a pint glass full of water in true form. So I hope that you have something nice to drink. In true form, I feel like I don't have that many projects to show you, but what normally happens when I think that is that I end up rambling for absolutely ages, so let's just see how this goes. As it's episode 50, one of my lovely and wonderful patrons pointed out that it's a little bit of a milestone for us here at the Crimson Stitchery, and it got me feeling quite reflective over the last month. So I'm really happy to be sitting here recording with you. Cheers again. Third time I think that is. Every time I say cheers, you have to drink something pleasant. But to anybody who is new around here or who has, recently joined us here on YouTube, a big welcome to you. I thought that maybe I'd reintroduce myself slightly, this being episode 50. My name is Anushka. I live here on the outskirts of London, in suburbia if you like, with my partner Mr. Tech Support and our newly acquired beast, who featured heavily in the last episode 49 of the Crimson Stitchery, who currently, true to form, is guarding the front door against foreign invaders who are obviously going to break in and murder us all. You see where his mind goes. To anyone who asked about the beast, yes, he does have a name, but I just have decided, in the same way that I'm not, telling you the full name of my other half, I'm also not, just decided to keep a few things personal there. Like I wouldn't tell you the full name of my, mother as well. Mother's maiden name, exactly, I wouldn't tell you. Just trying to keep a little bit of privacy because I feel like I reveal so much to you guys online, especially with this endless rambling and the way that when we talk about knitting and what we make, it just opens up a whole nother realm and a way to kind of get to know people on a deeper level very, very quickly. But, it's easy to forget that actually I don't know that many of you at all. And, obviously there's people that interact with me like on every single video and also in my newsletter. Please do subscribe if you haven't done so already to my newsletter. Like there's people who reply to every newsletter and write back to me, but there's thousands more people who never even say hello and who are completely anonymous, which is fine and normal. And I've been there. I watch videos and don't comment on other people's videos necessarily. Like I didn't feel the need to write a comment in all of those videos that I watched of cats boxing dogs in the face. I'm sure the video makers would have appreciated a comment. But anyway, the point being that, although probably some of you feel like you know me quite well, there's just so many other people out there and I just don't know who they are. And sometimes it's really weird, like when I see people that I kind of semi-know or even that I know quite well and they're like, oh yeah, I've been watching you on YouTube. I'm like, really? You never told me. They're like, oh yeah, how's this? You did this, that and the other. How's that going? And I'm like, I don't remember telling you. So yeah, it's just something to bear in mind when you put yourself out there on the internet. It's often not quite, we have these sort of friendships, like real friendships that we enter into, but it is still the public realm. So I hope you can understand that decision, although I will say that since I know my patrons a little bit better, best of all probably because we message, sometimes daily over on our Discord server, which is a chat group which is pretty active, which is really nice. So, obviously things are a bit more open there, which kind of just feels natural because again, it's not like widely publicly accessible. So anyway, that's that. The Beast, henceforth known as Dog-Faced the Hound. Let's talk about what's in my knitting basket or knitting and crochet. stuff is dropping out already. So the first thing is that I have a half finished object for you. Hooray! So these are the blue interference gloves that I started and showed you on the last episode. Which, as I mentioned, I had been intending for them to become my winter dog walking gloves. We are now managing to go around the park with various degrees of success, but I feel like, well, basically we adopted this rescue dog for anyone that's new, and we've been struggling with it. My other half has had dogs, including rescues before, but this one has just got his own character. He's his own unique being, and when you look up stuff about rescue dogs online, you know, they just kind of tell you like repetition, patience, and taking it slow. And we are lucky, you know, we adopted him from a charity, and we have access to like help and support with a dog behaviourist and stuff like that. But it has been pretty tough. So in some respects, it has definitely felt like one step forward, and then you kind of relax and think it's all good, and then you literally take 2 steps back, sometimes literally, when it comes to the leash training, because it basically, I don't know what his previous owners did to him, but A, wasn't very much, and B, probably wasn't very nice to him, because there's lots of kind of basic dog behaviour stuff, and he was in a home before, he wasn't from a puppy mill, he was in a home, but there's just all sorts of stuff that is just very bizarre to me, that we're like, where did that come from, and why is that like that? So anyway, dog walks vaguely in the future. I was thinking of doing a video about blocking this, because if that will focus, you can hopefully see that it's really, really lumpy, like incredibly lumpy. Yeah, so I thought maybe it could be interesting to do a video about wet blocking. This being a scrap project, I'm using 3 different yarns. They're all different weights, like there's lace weight, 4-ply and sport weight. So that's one of the reasons why it's come out really lumpy, but also just because, as I mentioned in the last video, I'm not very big on doing stranded colour work. I don't really enjoy it. I found doing the fingers not too bad. Like, I think doing fingers on gloves often feels like it's going to be really tedious, but you kind of just end up getting into it. It's probably a bit like when you're making children's toys of little animals and you have to knit all of the different legs. It's that kind of idea, like once you just get going, just crack on, it's not that bad. I didn't do a gauge swatch with this, just because I knew that my colour work tension was gonna just be all over the place, and the best way of checking my gauge would be to start the item and rip out if necessary. So I haven't measured my gauge, but I did have to change the length of the fingers for my actual fingers, which is probably a normal thing to do, because I believe there was only one size given for the glove, which is blue interference from the book Warm Hands by Kate Davies and Jeanette Sloan, who are the editors. It's an edited collection. Yeah, so the finger length just seemed totally off. You know, I have a medium size hand, size 7.5. Glove size 7.5. One thing that I found a bit odd was that the width of the fingers like got wider through the hand, which I just kind of followed. I just followed along in terms of the width. I didn't change around the fingers. So like the little finger has got, you know, X amount of stitches, and then the ring finger is like X+1, then it's X+2, X+3. So the forefinger is like the chunkiest finger. And I don't know about you, but my middle finger is the chunkiest finger, not the forefinger. So I thought that was a bit bizarre, but whatever. I mean, I added length as I've mentioned, which might be due to gauge or not. And you know, you don't feel that much difference. And they're super warm, super hot, just what I've wanted for my imaginary winter dog walks. We're not morning people in this household. We are stereotypes of artists and musicians and writers. We're all 3. 2 of us. Well, and the dog, what's he? Who knows? Performance artist. Yeah, we're not morning people, so I don't know, you know, this sort of fantasy of this like misty, like frosty grass winter morning dog walk with my like super hot stranded wool, knitted 100% wool gloves. Yeah, it will happen at some point. It's always nice to have lots of gloves, isn't it? Because they always end up with either just really holy in the fingers, or one ends up getting lost. So I'm glad that I'm finally doing this. I would like to knit more gloves just in plain colours, but I'll have to keep looking for a good pattern, I guess. I always do fingerless gloves and then have really cold fingers. So there you go. Now I cast on for the second one straight away so that, you know, I wouldn't get put off. And then just as I'm knitting this horrible cuff, I'm like creating this huge mess. Like everything is joined up now. This horrible cuff, which is half twisted rib, so the knit is twisted but the purl isn't, and then in stranded colourwork. I'm just reminded about how much I loathed it. I hated doing it. It's so horrible. So it's going to take a lot of perseverance to get through that. But yeah, as I said, not in a huge rush. We're not. They're not really needed yet. So hang on, let me put this all away. Well, away-ish, shove it to the side. So then the next I've been working on a lot is something that I can't show you in perpetuity yet, but I've basically knitted a whole sweater minus the sleeve. And as usual, I knit like some of the sleeve twice because I've had to redo it, and I might have to knit some of the sleeve again. So all I'm doing is holding it up and showing it to you. It's this amazing nutmeg colour, or maybe ground cinnamon. And this is a project which I am blogging about in detail over on Patreon. I'm blogging about the whole process of creating a sweater knitting pattern design, literally from the very first conversation that I had with the company that I'm collaborating with again, which is Black Isle Yarns, who I've worked with in the past on my Oregano Socks design. That in fact is part of the story. So I'm doing a sweater with their new yarn, or semi-new, yarn called Killen, which is one that she's relaunching this year. So it's sort of, she had an old version and now she's got a new version of it, but it's the same principle, which is a really special rustic yarn, if you like, but it's very, very special yarn and an unusual blend of mohair and blue-faced Leicester, which has got very interesting properties. So it's been this real adventure and journey for me to think about wool fibre in terms of like breed, and in terms of like thinking so carefully about how fibre affects the fabric texture and drape and density. So as I said, I've been exploring that through my blog posts. So if that's something that's, you know, that you enjoy, if you miss the world of blogging, or if you just are intrigued a bit more about the story and the journey of like the whole project, then do head over to my Patreon page. It's patreon.com/The Crimson Stitchery, which is where I'm blogging about that. And I know that many of my patrons are enjoying that series, so thank you very much. But yeah, so mostly been doing like this tedious glove that I'm not really enjoying, and then this sweater, which I'm just forcing myself to kind of knit and write up, knit and write up, knit and write up, because what inevitably happens is that I enjoy the knitting process and I hate the pattern writing process, but it's a necessary evil for me. It's a means to an end. So I've got to do it. And then what's happened now is that like I kind of got so far, then I changed my mind about something. And I've had to go back because it's important for me to like see things out in form and try them on, and you know, sometimes imagining isn't quite enough because things don't always quite work out as planned, which is normal. You kind of plan for the unplannable as part of it. So yeah, that's obviously taking up quite a lot of time. And then what I just grabbed the other day, because I was not enjoying the glove, but I really just wanted to relax in front of some television. I'm rewatching Friends and enjoying all of the 90s looks, like just enjoying them so much. It's got to a weird point where they look quite contemporary to now. I mean, literally season 1 and season 2 looks pretty good. I'm looking at their hair and I'm like, look at all that volume, ooh. And stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't wear it, but like I'm looking at all the blokes in their big oversized chunky cable knits and thinking, oh, that looks so nice and cozy. You know, it's quite different from like men's sweaters. Like right now in this day and age, they're like super, you know, spray painted on, really tight. Men's sweaters have got really tight. At least if you indulge in the trashier forms of television, which, you know, appear on my screen from time to time. Yeah. So yeah, crochet. So I picked up this leftovers granny square project. So I think what I've done here right now, I'm just looking at this pile. I've just kind of rearranged them in order of like light, medium and dark in terms of how they go. So basically I'm making a bunch of very simple crochet granny squares in quite a strict colour palette of leftovers, which is a normal thing for me to do, dropping them all over the floor. So I've got blue, teal, cream, brown and grey, and kind of off-white. I said cream, didn't I? Anyway, oh, and hints of yellow. So the plan is to put them all together and make a big crochet howdy, which is a loose jacket which sits over the top of a kimono, but I just like to wear them on their own. So you can see these really nice colour combos. And as usual, I feel like I'm probably going to run out of leftovers. This tends to happen, like I start a leftover project and then I don't quite have enough of one colour and end up acquiring another ball, or never quite works out. But anyway, at least I'm making some kind of use of scraps. And as usual for my crochet leftover projects, of which this jumper I'm wearing, the eclectic jumper or sweater, this is another leftover project I did during the first lockdown. I'm using a range of yarn weights, so mostly Sport and DK, but also Aran and also 4-ply, so a whole bunch. So they're coming out slightly different sizes, some of them. But yeah, if I just hold them up, and then you can see I've got a little bit of like metallics leftovers here. If I just hold them up like that, you can see it's going to be a nice, cool coloured howdy with pops of this mad bright yellow. And I'm going to need quite a lot because I think that I want there to be 16 squares for the front and back, I think, because I can do a border trimming the edge as well, just of like stripes or something. And then I've got to do the sleeve, so that's probably going to be another 16 on each sleeve. So what's that? 16 times 4 is 64. So how many have I got now? 2, 4, oh no, 6, I'm just throwing them on the floor as usual. 8, 10, I've got 11. And I think I've got one more started, she says. Yeah, I've got 11 and a quarter. And I meant to have 64, so we'll see. We'll see what happens with that project. It probably wouldn't, I'm calling it an howdy, but I don't know if I would have the extended sleeve that goes down. I might just do it as a kind of loose jacket with arm gussets. And I go on about howdies quite a lot in my recent video where I answered questions about knitting alterations. So it's called Tricky Knitting Alterations, and it's part of a series which I've been filming and releasing since, well, over the last couple of months really, in response to viewer demand and in response to feedback from my patrons, because I did a poll about what kind of content that you guys would like to see over autumn. So thank you to everybody who has, made that request, provided me with suggestions and feedback, and also to everyone who asked me questions for that specific Q&A video. It's very much appreciated, and I always think of the Crimson Stitchery as a two-way process. It's on the one hand me sitting alone at home filming. My dog thinks that I'm a total weirdo because I'm talking to a small black box, the camera in front of a large white box, the light. My dog thinks I'm weird. But it's actually then you put in all of this work kind of on your own quietly, and then you kind of go off into the digital sphere and have all of these wonderful conversations with people who I very well may never have met in the so-called real life, but maybe in face-to-face at events and stuff like that. But we're still in the pandemic, believe it or not, despite what all of the governments of the world seem to think. Apart from maybe Australia and New Zealand, you guys seem to still realise that we're in a pandemic. Yes, sadly, 2 of my friends, well, a couple, have been double jabbed and caught the latest variant of COVID and were very, very unwell, which just becomes really, just kind of always brings it home, doesn't it? When you have someone that you actually know that is suffering and that is unwell. They have actually recovered now, thank goodness. But yeah, I'm definitely ready to go back to normal, but stuff like universities are still closed until the spring term in terms of the buildings. So I'm just, continuing to be a weird hermit at home by myself without human company. So thanks for being here. So those are all of the projects that I have to share, because it's mainly been this sweater that I've been, raveling and unraveling, unraveling. So what's raveling? I've got no idea. I mean, I know there's Ravelry, but that's a company, right? What is that as a verb? To ravel. You have to revel, which is to celebrate, to sort of enjoy something lively, in a lively manner. But raveling, I've got no idea. So because it's our 50th episode, one of my patrons pointed out that it's quite a big milestone, which is really exciting. And we'll be coming up to 3 years of the Crimson Stitchery next February. So that's in another, 4 or 5 months time. But we're kind of, really getting towards some really big milestones. And I thought that for episode 50 we could do a little prize draw. What I want to talk about is how I learnt to knit, because this is something that I've alluded to quite a few times on different videos, especially on sort of different tutorial videos I've done where I've kind of put how I've learnt my skills and stuff like that into context. I also did an interview last autumn on the Collage Creative audio podcast with wonderful Amy of Knit Collage, hello if you're watching, where I also alluded to how I got started. And I'd really love to know about you guys as well. So I thought that I would give away to 2 people who leave a comment on this YouTube video any 2 patterns of your choice of my downloadable PDF knitting patterns. And if you have already got my patterns, if you're a loyal supporter, then I can also gift them to someone of your choice. And all you have to do is leave me a comment and let me know how you learnt to knit and how long you've been doing it for. But I thought that I'd share my story now too. Hang on. Come. Hello. Come here. Okay, so little bit of story time. Those of you who have been following me and my exploits for a little while will know that I learned to knit when I was a teenager. I think I was around 13 or 14, 15, that kind of mid-teens, classic mid-teens kind of age, in the middle of secondary school. And I ended up learning to knit because I had a really, really excellent textiles teacher who was a very inspiring woman, quite formidable. She was definitely one of those teachers that is really hard on you if she believes in you. And to be honest with you, I think she believed in a lot of people and a lot of friends, and she was quite strict and firm and quite eccentric in some ways. She made all of her own clothing and she had her own way of doing things. And she was really fantastic. So this was in secondary school. We had a really good kind of general art and technical skills department. I don't know what you would call it, but everybody always enjoyed all of the kind of non-academic, if you like, skills, the more creative and practical skills, including like food technology and cooking. That was always everyone's favourite lesson because you got to eat at the end of it. Textiles was fun, art was really, really inspiring, and all of the rest of it. So yeah, we were very fortunate that we had really excellent kind of creative arts teachers across the board at secondary school. So a lot of people, when they talk about when they've learnt to knit, like I feel like a lot of people, especially if they're from Northern Europe, or maybe Eastern Europe as well actually, like learn through childhood at school, or they have, grandmother and mother figures and auntie figures that knit quite a lot. But when it comes to my family, certainly lots and lots of people in the family had done knitting and dressmaking, crochet, sewing and all of the like of it. But largely because, on the whole, because it was like the 1970s and it was what you did because it was trendy. So like my grandma did do knitting and my mum did a lot of crochet and so on, and dressmaking, but very much as a hobby. And there were professional people in my family, like there are tailors in my family, and things like that. But in my actual immediate family, everyone was an amateur, and people had sort of done a little bit here and there, but it wasn't the kind of like lifelong knitting, like really skilled knitting in families like you hear about. But everybody did make things and people did do knitting and crochet. So I remember in my childhood, like there were a few times where I think my mum tried to show me how to knit, or I expressed interest in it, and I had absolutely no patience for it and I just threw it aside. But something about being in my mid-teens, it just clicked. And yeah, off I went. Like I only learnt the knit stitch through school, because we were doing this project where we had to create samples of different fabric types. So we had to do a bit of weaving, a bit of knitting, a bit of spinning. That was really hard. I was never very good at that and never really enjoyed it. But knitting was fun. And at the time, I also had a friend who was half Finnish, a classmate. She's half Finnish and half Chinese, and her mother was one of those lifelong knitters, as I'm sure many people are in Finland. That's okay. It's just the oven. It's just the oven. He's going to get really hot in a sec and jump off because I can feel my hand is sweating in dog fluff. In the midst of dog fluff. So yeah, we only learnt the knit stitch, so my friend like went home and her mum taught her how to purl, and then we just started like making these little projects and stuff like that. And because it was the mid-2000s, like you could look stuff up online. So, you know, I like went to the library and got out lots of library books and looked up stuff online, and it was the time of the knitting blog, and, you know, people were beginning to self-publish and sell PDF patterns online through their blogs and stuff like that. And it just opened me up to a realm of like new patterns, because obviously, you know, in this period we were quite dominated by like John Lewis, which is basically this department store, but when it comes to like local yarn shops, I think they were only just beginning to have a resurgence on the British High Street, because what had been very popular, like local haberdasheries that like old ladies would, you know, you'd get all of the patterns and all of the wools and stuff like that, like on every high street. That was kind of coming to an end, very sadly. I miss those fantastic local haberdasheries where, you know, they'd sell everything in reams and everything by the metre, like 5p a metre for bias binding, and they had lace and ribbons and lots of yarns and patterns. So that was sort of coming to the end, and it was the point where, you know, there weren't really local yarn stores in the same way, but you had John Lewis department store. But they had, you know, quite expensive yarns at the time. They tended to stock Rowan yarns, who were like the hot thing, and it was really, really pricey. But, you know, on knitting blogs, I could discover a whole realm of like new designers, new patterns, and people trying out new techniques for themselves. And it was also the time of the Stitch and Bitch books, which I got hold of, and it was all very, you know, to like a 13 or 14-year-old, that kind of, ooh, someone just burped, kooky styling, bright colours and lots of like kitschy patterns. Like they had the cat ear hat pattern, they had like a bunny ear hat pattern, they had a baby trousers which had a devil tail, and just like lots of kitsch over the top things that really appealed to my sensibility as a kiddie, basically. And like I worked my way through those books. They taught me a whole host of new techniques, and it kind of just went from there, really, just knitting online through blogs, through library books. And then I just carried on. I think through the blogging sphere, I discovered like Susan Crawford's A Stitch in Time, where she, this was the point where she was, publishing that book, or republishing it, because I had, been looking through my family 70s and 80s knitting patterns, and I had been, getting stuff from thrift stores and charity shops. So it was quite cool to see her versions of like rewriting them for modern yarns and stuff like that, and multi-sizing them. So it's definitely, hello, what's wrong? Definitely my learning how to knit has evolved with like how knitting has very much evolved online. Then I went to university, so at this point we're between 2009 and 2012, and I had the Stitch in Time books and not very much money, so I proceeded to try and knit my way through those. I made loads of those designs, don't have them all anymore. Some of them weren't successful. I wore them despite that, wore them even though they didn't look great, and then eventually got rid of them, or a couple of things I lost sadly, or got damaged, or whatever, got worn out. And then I, bye-bye. It's getting too hot now. Then I, finished university. I remember learning to crochet about a year after I finished my bachelor's degree, because I was working a job that was quite stressful and I wasn't enjoying it, and I was like being bullied at work and stuff like that. So I was suffering from insomnia and stress. And one night I just decided I'm going to learn to crochet, and so I did. Learned overnight because I had the Reader's Digest guide to needlework in my bookshelf next to my bed where I was living, and so I just pulled it off the shelf literally right next to my bed, opened it up, grabbed some yarn and a crochet hook that I had at home because it was like my mum's from when she was younger, and yeah, just taught myself how to crochet. And then I remember like going to hide in that workplace, hide in various different dark corners and corridors like for a bit to get a breather when it was time for a break and stuff like that, and like doing a little bit of crochet here or there. So that was only around like 2012 or 13 or something like that. So I've not, I suppose that's kind of added up to quite a lot of years, but I definitely don't consider myself that good at crochet compared to knitting, where I've really like explored so many different avenues and tried lots of different skills out. So then around that period, we're sort of getting into the mid 2010s now, I didn't do as much knitting, or I went here or there, and the online knitting sphere changed between like blogs and websites and went more towards social media and YouTube and Instagram and stuff like that, and I wasn't very present for that until I think it was when I was doing my master's degree. So now we're around 2016, something like that, 15, and I did an Erasmus trip to Sweden, and I was desperately lonely and desperately cold, and discovered knitting podcasts on YouTube, discovered going to knitting groups in Stockholm, and just decided to set myself the mission in the depths of the freezing cold Stockholm winter, where all of the water and all of the lakes were still frozen at the end of April that year. I set myself the mission of finding a new small local yarn shop every weekend and going out and like getting a coffee, buying a small ball of sock yarn because it was cheap, and knitting socks. And so I did that, started taking pictures of it on Instagram, moved back to London, got a bit more involved in the scene. At this point, there's like this huge thriving local yarn shop scene and knitting scene in London that has grown up since, because I'm from London, I'm a Londoner from the outskirts. So like I've really seen like what has happened with the scene and the trends and so on and so forth, like within the city. I'm one of those annoying people that will walk around and be like, that wasn't there last month, last week, last year, last decade, like that building, and stuff like that, like kind of tracing how areas have changed throughout, my 30 years of being a Londoner. So yeah, then things kind of started changing, I think, through that, just having the need to knit sort of to keep me going, to get me out of this horrible flat share that I was in, to get me out of myself in Sweden, and then to kind of have something that kept me constant, I think, through various difficult times. I think that's something that certainly stands true for me, and I'm sure it does for other people. There have certainly been times in my life where I haven't done very much knitting. There have been times where I've done tons of knitting, I've not taken a single photo. There have been times where I've knitted loads of stuff and it's been all given away because it was gifts, because it was baby items and stuff like that. But here I am, been knitting for over half of my life. I honestly can't remember how old I was, but I think it was probably year 8, so I was probably 12 or 13, 14, something like that. I don't think it was year 9, I do think it was year 8 when I first started, just because I'm thinking of like where I was in the school building and like who I was talking to as friends and stuff like that. And I've just kind of kept going. It's just something that I do. Sometimes I've barely done anything, sometimes it's just been for fun, and other times, like right now, I'm thinking about how it actually is possible to really integrate it with the more formal aspects of my creative and intellectual processes. This is something that I'm coming to terms with as I go into my 30s, to think about, what actually are the things that give, make my life meaningful, or rather that have kind of seen me through in a meaningful way, and how do I want to spend my time, and sort of what is worth pursuing and what isn't pursuing. And I'm sort of coming to realise that doing knitting is not just this slightly quaint hobby that I do on the bus to college, or whatever, on the tube to work, or and stuff like that. It's not just something that I do in front of the telly in the evenings and just kind of pull out when I'm feeling frustrated in other areas of life, although that's definitely the case as well. But actually maybe it's possible to integrate it much more in terms of what I'm doing on a day-to-day, and almost give it its own worth for me as a creative and intellectual person. So that's basically the story of how I started knitting, from like having a intimidating / inspiring teacher to kind of just getting hooked and getting the bug. And as you can see, it's been largely self-taught, and it's been largely about, you know, having the curiosity to find things out and to be willing to try completely new things and get them wrong and pull them out, constantly ripping stuff back, which, you know, if you've been following me for my time online as the Crimson Stitchery for the last 2.5 years, you'll doubtless be very, very familiar with. Making mistakes is just inevitable and part of the process. And so my question to you is, how long have you been knitting? How old were you when you started? And when roughly in time was that? So I can imagine like what your hairstyle was like and what your makeup was like and what the cut of your sweaters was like in that time period. So do drop me a comment down below. 2 people stand the chance of winning 2 patterns from my online, you know, knitting store, from my downloadable PDF patterns, self-designed ones. And if you already have my patterns, you are more than welcome to nominate someone else as a gift. It could be someone random. It could be, you know, a friend or whatever. So just drop me a comment down below, but make sure that you do watch the next episode of the knitting vlog, so the one that comes at the end of October in about a month's time, so that you can check if you've won or not, because it's always such a shame when prizes go unclaimed. So make sure that you have subscribed to the Crimson Stitchery and hit the notification bell if you want to have that on, so that you find out about when new videos are being released. At the moment, this autumn, we should, fingers crossed, be getting back to a slightly more regular video upload schedule of roughly every other Wednesday. Things have just been very, very strange in 2021. I know that 2020 was basically a shit show, but 2021 for me you know, 2020 didn't go according to plan, obviously, and 2021, it's just not been great for various different reasons, which I quite frankly do not want to bore anybody with. But hopefully things are going to become more stable again. I have a pet. I have a pet now, keeping me occupied as well, which is pretty nice, and is helping me get into a sense of routine and rhythm through the days and the weeks, which is definitely something helpful, just to have that, to have a little bit of stability, even though he's pretty unstable himself, let's be honest. Thank you again to everyone who has offered advice, solidarity, moral support when it comes to having rescue pets. I really appreciate it, because when you look stuff up about rescue pets, as I said, I think people don't want to be discouraging of rescuing animals, so I feel like you often don't hear about quite how hard it can be, and you just hear like all of the uplifting, like, we got there in the end, it's so rewarding kind of tales, and I'm just like, well, we're right in the middle of it, where it's like every week a new thing produces a new reaction. You know, you thought that he loved being brushed, and then suddenly he wants to bite the brush. I have like one of the most high maintenance dog breeds that needs brushing every day, and he hates the brush and runs away from it. Oh my God. Anyway, that's just sharing a little bit too much information. But I would like to give a shout out to everybody who has supported the Crimson Stitchery in absolutely any and every way that has been possible, by leaving me a thumbs up on my YouTube videos, subscribing, leaving me a comment, buying me a coffee on Ko-fi, subscribing to my newsletter, and indeed becoming one of my patrons over on Patreon. For any length of time, I deeply, deeply appreciate you. And I seriously mean it when I say that I just wouldn't be doing it anymore if it wasn't for the interactions and wonderful experiences, by and large, that I have with you guys. So thank you so much for being here, because really I just wouldn't be doing it anymore. I just wouldn't be, and I am really glad to be here and to be exploring this creativity and to be sharing it with you all alongside and in real time, more or less. An extra large shout out goes to my supporters at the Crimson Queens tier, which is the highest tier on Patreon. So thank you so much for your generosity. Thank you, Shelley, and thank you, Angie Scheitel. It's amazing. Thank you. I'm always tongue-tied when I just start to think about how amazing it is that people are, you know, keeping me going with their actual money. Just, it's really nice of you. But also, as I said, any and all other forms of support are deeply, deeply appreciated, and I'm just very, very thankful. So I'm looking forward to what's going to come up with the autumn. I honestly have so many patterns that I'm working on, which I know I've said before, but I'm just trying to like take the time that I need to work on them and not feel too rushed. I'm also working, you know, with a tech editor, and I'm hoping to work much more with test knitting, and that slows down the process quite a lot more, but hopefully it will end up making it a better finished project. I have a really exciting collaboration coming up. Fingers crossed it will be ready for the deadline of December, which is that if you followed me over the last 12 months, you'll be aware that in December what year was it last year? In December 2020, I launched a winter, I can't talk. In December 2020, I launched a winter solstice collaboration design project. And last year I did it with the wonderful Diana Waller of Paper Tiger Knit. So hey Diana, if you're watching, it was an absolute joy to work with you. And I'm absolutely thrilled to say that this is going to become an annual event for me and for you, in that I am doing another collaboration for this December 2021 for the winter solstice or the December solstice, depending on where you live in the world, with another designer who is extremely well known. Well, Diana's obviously pretty well known as well, but another designer who's also very well known, who people are pretty crazy about. So I'm absolutely delighted that that person has agreed to work with me, and we've come up with really exciting plan of action. And I've received yarn support for it, and I'm just looking at it over there in a big pile, and I was going to tell you about it, but I might save it for next month so that we can keep a little bit like dribbling along the excitingness as it comes. So I'm going to be busy doing swatches and stuff like that, and finishing off my collaboration for Black Isle Yarns. I have another shawl pattern which has been just sitting around waiting to come out, but still not ready for various reasons, unfortunately. So there's so much stuff in the pipeline, and I need to stop starting new things and finish projects that have already been started. I need to get better at finishing things. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled. Do subscribe to my newsletter, as I've said, if you want to get updates as well through the written form. If YouTube is not enough for you, I write about once a month, roughly speaking. Sometimes I can't get one out because there's a lot going on, and I need to just work through my list and tick things off one thing at a time. But very glad, as I said, to be feeling better than I have done all year. Still don't feel back to being me. I'm still not 100%, but I'm definitely vastly improved in many different spheres of life. Honestly, there's just been so much stuff going on. Most of it like would be oversharing and too much information. So yeah, anyway, we're getting there. And I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to stop rambling, she says, as always. I'm going to stop rambling, finish my sherry glass full of wine, and start editing this podcast. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to leave me a comment, and I will see you again at the Crimson Stitchery sometime soon. Take care of yourself. Happy knitting. Bye.